So Planetek approached me and said they were looking for an old dinosaur who could speak about the past as an introduction to what may happen in the future, but just give the context of how we were working years ago. And the old dinosaur's me, and what I'd like to do is actually share with you some really historical information and some historical moments about what we did 30 years ago. And it actually all started 17th of July 1991 with ESA's first satellite, EARSC, which was launched on this date. In those days, this was pre-internet, and this is how we communicated. This is actually I've still got this stuff. This is the first fax of missions operation report, and it was issued by the flight team at ESOC. And it's important there, you can see the first report was T plus 14 hours, 15 minutes. So these things were regularly circulated, and gradually, as the mission was brought up, the instruments were switched on, there were regular fax reports. This is actually to the project manager, Zobel, who was sitting down in Kourou, and it's from the flight team in ESOP. So this is the way we worked. Now, one of the principal instruments was the synthetic aperture radar, and 10 days after launch, the SAR was switched on, and actually we'd arranged for an important event, which was we would ship the Italian minister, who'd paid for this thing, down to Fucino to see the real-time acquisition of the first image on tape recorder, HDDR, which was then ingested into the processor, and in those days, the image would scroll up on a CRT monitor. And this actually is the real first image of EARSC, 10 days after launch, that scrolled up. Actually, it was worse than this. There was a sort of section of the image that scrolled up, so it looked even worse. And it was a total mess. And, you know, there was a bit of a panic. The minister wasn't too impressed. Well, is it supposed to be like that? Nobody really knew what was going on. Emergency shipment of the HDDR tape back to Esrin, and activation of the serious guys who were the project team stationed in Kiruna to try and find out what the problem was. The Club Med guys, which was us down in Frascati, in parallel also started investigating this thing with the tape. And I have a short video of what we were doing when that came back in a complete replica of the fast delivery processing chain in Esrin. So if we can get this thing, this is the EARSC fast delivery processing chain. If we can get it to work, off we go. We were working all day and all night. Systematically, this is the HDDR. This was recorded on a Sony camcorder. It's been digitized by Zoltan's wife. Thank you very much. That's ingestion of the data through the Laban interface. That's a very youthful-looking Henri Law, who was working with us. Here we are. Can we actually see what's going on? And no, we get the same streaky, horrible rubbish on the monitor. This is the resident guy from MDA who was operating the system. And systematically, no. Still the same problem. So, what do? We got this guy on the job, Mark Doherty. We were actually on the phone, oh, that's a youthful looking me too, rebuilding the code on the processor, and actually up came, after a wild guess by the real SAR genius back in Vancouver, who was building the code and rerunning the processor in Frascati, but couldn't see the monitor. We got a perfectly focused SAR image. This was about 1 a.m. We called in the boss, Livio Morelli, and the head of the establishment. They both came in. I don't know if that would happen these days. And that was the result. What was happening was we were going systematically through all of the processing parameters to try and find the problem. And the guy back in Vancouver said, well, you know, measure the distance on the screen of these two white blobs, because I'm going to try something and they should go further apart. Well, they actually came closer, and he said, no, that's impossible. That can't happen. Okay, let's stop the systematic stuff. I've got a wild hunch. Rebuild the code, and this came up. And what was happening actually was it was a misalignment in the definition of the signal from the satellite in the telemetry, the SAR signal, the real and complex components, and the definition in the processor. Problem fixed, everything's working fine. To my knowledge, we were the first 4 human beings on the planet. Me, Mark Doherty, Henri Law, and actually the night shift operator of the computer system, a gentleman called Roberto Nappi, to see this. Roberto called his mother at 1 o'clock in the morning and said, I don't quite know what's happened here, but something amazing's happened, and I think we're all going to be on the news tomorrow. Well, we weren't, but a piece of history. Interestingly enough, we said to the boss, look, we better phone the project team up in Kiruna and tell them that we've discovered what's going on and give them the good news. No, let's wait till the morning. I'll phone the director and tell him that we've solved the problem, then we'll phone the project team. So this is actually the full image. The one officially released, fully focused, and also Henri did a very beautiful color-coded version of the same track, but a little bit further up. So off we go, problem fixed, 800 million ECU satellite working perfectly. Interferometry, we could start with interferometry. We're in Milano, and what I wanted to say is we started working with some of the key guys and real characters in this business. This is Fabio Rocca and Claudio Prati. They weren't the only ones involved in the first results, but they were key guys in pushing this thing forward. And the exciting thing was everything was new. Actually, EARSC was built largely as an oceanographic mission. The SCAT was measuring surface wind speeds and injecting those wind speeds into the MET system within 3 hours of acquisition, 24/7. But the land mission, the SAR land mission, nobody really even knew if C-band interferometry would work. So everything was new. These guys were just geniuses, and it was a real privilege to work with them. And off they went and did the very first interferogram. The mission was launched and operated and brought up end of July, and by August 1991, they'd done the first interferogram. Not the very best part of the world to do the first interferogram. It's a forested, rocky, and very high terrain, variable terrain part of Sardinia. Difficult to work in, but we didn't know at the time. We didn't know all of those constraints. So on the top is the interferogram, and on the bottom is the unwrap phase. And those are the very first images that came from Claudio. So let's get organized. So towards the end of the year, what ESA decided to do was get the leading European scientists together. And that included more from the Italian sector, Naples, the Germans, Institute of Navigation Studies at Stuttgart, and the French Space Agency. And we actually formed an ad hoc little working group called Fringe. And now I think the annual Fringe meetings, this is a piece of history as well. It's the first workshop on the right-hand side that was held later in that year with the very first results covering differential interferometry. It's no good.
If you want to use this one, you can use this
one. No, I don't want to use this one. Okay, thanks. Okay. 6 months after the start of this ad hoc research group, most of the basic research results in interferometry were actually available and published in this little report. And one of those was a fairly amazing thing that was done with Hartel's group in the Institute of Navigation Studies, which came to be known as the Bonn experiment, and it was done as a blind experiment. Hartel had 20 corner reflectors that were mounted on concrete bedrock layered mounts, and they could actually be moved very precisely on precision gauges. And the idea was these were strung across 20 kilometers in Germany. We were in the 3-day repeat mode with EARSC, so we're taking images every 3 days. And the idea was a processing group in Milan, Rocca and Prati, would actually try and process the data and decide which corner reflectors had been moved on which days by what amount. And the two groups were acting as blind groups. They weren't allowed to communicate. And the whole point of this was to demonstrate that very, very small motion could actually be detected by a satellite 800 kilometers high, traveling at 7 kilometers per second. And this was one of the results. What you actually see on the left-hand side is the phase difference, which is called emeralds and rubies because it was on a color-coded CRT, and the top of the screen was green and the bottom was red. So you saw this green emerald coming out of a sea of rubies of phase, and that corresponded, the processing group said that corresponded to movements of 7 to 9 millimeters. And on the right-hand side is the official communication from the ground team to the mission manager, who said that the processing group had actually found the right corner reflectors on the right days, but they'd moved by 1 centimeter. So they were almost there, but not quite. But that was a fantastic demonstration that the accuracy of this technique could work. What was needed after that was a full-scale land motion experiment, and very shortly, nature obliged with that. In the US, in Landers, California, there was a 7.2 magnitude earthquake, and very luckily, we had taken an acquisition before and after the earthquake, and Didier Massonnet did a full differential interferogram of the whole thing. It made the front cover of Nature. On the right-hand side, you see at the top the actual interferogram, and at the bottom, the modeled interferogram using the seismic knowledge of the earthquake. And the whole thing was an amazing success. Again, a complete first in the history of interferometry. And they just kept on coming. What we did then was launched EARSC2 in '95 and flew it in tandem with EARSC1. And we could get a whole series of new results looking at precision motion, flying one satellite slightly later than another. And again, the group looked at the breathing, systematic inflation and deflation of Etna, which made an article in Nature again, front cover. So that was it. Then everyone, the whole thing just started. Everything exploded. We started distributing the data, and the whole results came out. What you see is JPL down in Antarctica, the coherence, more precision interferometry, the development of the persistent scattering interferometer technique, lots and lots of new results from what has been grown now into a fully commercial business for precision land motion. So just to conclude, where has that gone to? It started with EARSC1 and EARSC2. In ESA, this went into the biggest satellite we've ever built. the 8-ton NVSat. And now we're working with Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-1A and 1B. But I should also say nationally, this has been the all those results have been the justification for the start of the TerraSAR-X mission in Germany and the Cosmo-X, the Cosmo SkyMed mission in Italy. So that has generated a phenomenal amount of follow-on activity. And where are we today? I would recommend that you check this out. This is just, it's a thing called INSAR Norway. It's Sentinel-1A, full interferometric coverage of Norwegian territory. It's a precise motion map. It's beautiful. You can go in, fly through it, throw a polygon, do analysis, find out how the Earth's moving, which zones are subject to landslides, etc., etc. So from those humble beginnings, this is where it's come to. And my last slide is, we started with the first image. I'll finish with the very last EARSC SAR data required. It went until the year 2000. On the right is the strip. It's a coherent strip with EARSC2. And on the left is the interferogram over the Castelli Romani. So it started first of everything. It was a tremendous privilege to work with all of those people and produce those results. And it's developed into just a fantastic, well, you can see here the sorts of heritage and results and business this is turned into. So with that, I'll stop and thank you very much.